Oh my goodness, I am so excited about this bag. This is the Nabette bag, a brand new pattern from Studio 77. I am so excited to show you this tutorial. Hi, I'm Emma from Studio 77. Welcome back, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please do consider subscribing and hitting that bell for lots of bag making and sewing tips, tricks and tutorials. So this is the Nabette bag. This is the trickiest pattern I have ever made. Super technical, but I have taken all the headaches out of it, I hope, so that you don't have any. The Nabette bag was originally part of the 77 Club for November. If you want to find out more about the club, you can find a link in the description below. You can follow this video step by step. Below in the description and in the first comment, you will find all the timestamps, so you can skip ahead as you see fit and pause and rewind as you may need to. If you have any questions, queries or comments as you go along throughout this video, please do pop them in the comments box below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So this Nabette is a brand new pattern, like I say. It's a kind of more traditional handbag. It's the first handbag that I've designed, and it has loads of features. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that the pieces wrap around the bottom of the bag. Can you see it doesn't look like there's any seams, there's no bottom seam in the bag, and this gives it quite a unique look. You've got corner pieces on the side for added feature as well, and then you've got the side straps, the strap connectors, which actually hide that side seam, so it continues that sort of cohesive, continuous look to the bag. Because you've got those strap connectors, you can also make it into a crossbody as well if you want to. And then you've got these rolled padded handles. I'm going to show you exactly how to make those. You can use edge coat if you want to, but you don't have to, so there's options for that. In the front we have a little zipper pocket, and it's just about big enough to hold a phone or you know, a bit of makeup, whatever you need to in there. At the top we have a zipper plaquet, and that is going to keep everything safe so that there's everything's kept in there nice and safe. You've got a bit of a longer zipper so that you can open the bag up really nice and fully. Then on the inside is where the magic happens even more. I'm going to turn the bag a little bit inside out so you can see a bit better, or pull the lining out I should say. So there you can see the zipper pocket a bit better, and you can see that divider pocket. So you can put something in there, you can put something in that central pocket piece, and then obviously you're going to have that space on the other side. You've got the two pockets which are kind of accordion or concertina coming off of that. So you can put your phone and your glasses in there, something like that. And then you've also got a cup holder as well. So you can put your water bottle or your coffee cup in there. So everything is really nice and organized for this bag. And it fits so many things in there as well. In fact, I've done a reel. If you want to go over to my Instagram, which is at Studio 77, you can see a reel of just everything that I managed to fit in this bag. It's a proper everyday, all day bag to fit all your essentials in. So on this video, I'm going to take you through it step by step. You will notice that there is no interfacing to the outside pieces of this bag other than the strap connectors and the handles. Always recommend you use woven for those pieces. The lining is all interfaced as normal with non-woven interfacing, but the outer I really recommend, and the pattern has been designed for faux leather or cork, or you may want to call faux leather vinyl as well. And then the piping pieces are in a quilting cotton too. The piping helps to add structure. You can omit that if you want to, or you can even add an extra strip to the other side of this strip piece here so that you have a double piping feature. So I think that's it. Let's get straight into the tutorial. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to print off your pattern. You can find that in the link in the description below. You are also going to want to prep some of your supplies. So we've got over here 2 lobster clasps. These are 1.5 inch to go with the webbing. Now, of course, you can use 1 inch webbing or change it up, totally up to you, but obviously those are going to match. You're going to need 1 inch D-rings. They need to be 1 inch to fit with the pattern. You're going to, if you're doing an adjustable strap, you're going to want a slider which matches your lobster clasp. Like I say, I'm using 1.5 inch or 38mm. You're going to want some rivets to match your hardware. You're going to want some scraps of Decaville light or some heavyweight interfacing. Optional to have a handmade tag or your own tag if you have one. Then of course you're going to need your cording, and we are doing these at 2 times 60 centimeters or 24 inch lengths. You're going to want your webbing, of course, and for this I'm doing an adjustable strap, and so I've cut mine at 148 centimeters or 58 inches. And that's if you're doing an adjustable strap. If you're not doing an adjustable strap, then you're going to want to cut that shorter to go with however long you want your strap to be. You're also going to need to cut, as per the cutting instructions, 2 times 60 centimeter lengths of your 3 centimeter strip, and this is to go around your cording. You're also going to want 3 different zippers. Now I have got a different one for my inside. That is 17.5 centimeters for your inside. You're going to want one which is 39 centimeters for your long zipper along the top of the bag, and then for the outer bag we're going to have 16.5 centimeters. Now I'm changing this bag up a little bit. I'm going to do a mixture of fabrics for the outside, so I'm going to use cork for the middle part of the bag, and for some of the extras like the straps I'm also going to use this aubergine colour for the rest of the bag, the sides of the bag, the bottom corners of the bag as well. Then on the inside, I am going to use 2 different lining fabrics, which are all 100% cotton quilting weight. That's the weight that I like to use for my bags. And I'm going to use this Tula Pink leopard print for the cup holder and the middle divider. And then I'm going to use this P&B Fabrics, I think it's called Blended Purple, for the rest of my lining. Okay, so prep out all your fabrics like it says in the instructions. You're going to want to interface all of your lining with non-woven interfacing, and you're going to want to interface your handles and your side straps with woven interfacing for the outer pieces. The rest of the outer pieces don't need to be interfaced. It's worth mentioning as well that for this project I am using a 90 Microtex needle. Then for some of the bulkier seams, when we're going over those side straps and things, I'm going to use a 110 jeans needle. Don't use a leather needle with faux leather or vinyl. It will puncture the seams and perforate it, and you will lose the strength on those seams. So I recommend a Microtex 90 and a jeans needle 110 for this project. You may also want to have a hump jumper, you may want to have fray check, and you may want to have edge coat as well when we come to those parts of the project. Do have double-sided quilting tape on hand, a walking foot as well, and you're going to want to have a friction pen and or a gel pen as well. Make sure that it's removable from your fabric when we get to that part. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our strap. Now, if you haven't made an adjustable strap before, I do have a video on exactly how to do that. I will pop that up on the screen right now, and you can find that in the link in the description too. So you're going to want to have your 2 lobster clasps and your slider. I'm going to go through doing the adjustable strap pretty quickly, but like I say, follow the video if you want to have a more in-depth tutorial. I'm going to fuse the ends because my webbing is a polypropylene webbing. It's a seatbelt webbing, so it fuses really nicely. If you're using a cotton webbing, you're going to want to add fray check to the ends of your webbing, and you're going to want to turn it under. I also zigzag the ends if I'm using a cotton webbing, just to make sure that it's really nice and secure. And then once you put it through your lobster clasp, if you're using cotton, you're going to want to fold it under again like so before you stitch it. We don't need to do that because ours is nicely sealed with the lighter. Once it's through the swivel hook, I'm going to fold it over by about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to place a couple of clips to hold that in place. Now that that's all attached, like I say, there is a video on this. I'll put that in the description below so you can find it if you want to know how to do that part. And then I'm just going to sew as close as I can to that middle of the slider, or if you're doing it just on the end of the lobster clasp, you're going to do exactly the same. And then I'm going to stitch a barn door, which is a rectangle or square with a cross in the middle to secure in place on both ends. You can also put rivets in the ends too to help secure it. I don't often like to do rivets in webbing, any kind of webbing, because it does perforate the fabric and it can cause the strength to not be as good. You can fuse it with a lighter as well, or you can even use a soldering iron to burn that hole, but I'm just going to stitch it. Okay, so our strap is complete and we're going to put that to one side for later. Then we're going to move on to our cording, our piping. So you're going to want your 2 piping pieces, your cording, and you're going to want your 2 strips. And we're going to just prepare these for when we want them a bit later on in the project. So we're just going to fold it over, and you can clip or pin just to keep that in place all the way down. I'm not going to put too many clips in, I'm just going to do it at the machine. I'm then going to use a zipper foot and I'm going to stitch pretty close, not as close as I can get. I don't want the stitches to show when we come to put it in. So I'm going to stitch pretty close to the edge of that cording. And then I'm going to repeat on the other strip so that we have 2 pieces of cording. Now it's worth mentioning that the cording I'm using is 4mm. You can use any kind of thickness of cording. It will give a different look, of course. You're also going to want to have some of the cording for the handles, and it's quite beneficial to have a thicker cording, so it's quite good to just buy one lot of cording and not have to buy multiple supplies. So moving on, we're going to do the front zipper on the outside. Okay, so you're going to need pattern piece 1, you're going to need pattern piece 19, 20 and 21, and also your outside zipper as well, which, just a reminder, that is the 16.5cm long one. Okay, so for my middle panel, I have gone for this cork, and then 19 is in cork as well to match, because that's going to go above it. And then I've got my zipper flap also in cork to match, and then the zipper pocket is in the lining of that purple, and obviously that's cut on the fold as well. I'll tell you that on the pattern. Now, one thing to bear in mind, and it is marked on the pattern, you want to make sure that the top is the bit that you're going to attach to your zipper. It's not symmetrical. One end is wider than the other. Can you see? It's not by much, but it's important to note that. Using our double-sided tape, we are going to place some along that top edge. Remember, just make sure you've got that same edge. And place our zipper face down. Now, you can choose which way your zipper opens. I like to have mine so that it closes on the left, but again, that is choice, depending on if you're left or right-handed or personal preference. It's worth noting as well that all my zippers have been basted before and all the zipper pulls put on. I have also fused the ends with a lighter as well. Then you're going to want to get your lining and you're going to want to put that down. Now, before I do that, you can baste along that edge if you want to, totally fine. You don't have to. I don't always if I am using double-sided tape. So this is a little bit quicker. You're missing out one step. In the instructions, it does tell you to baste it. So you do you. If you want to baste it, if you're worried about it, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to stitch. If you're basting it, you're going to stitch within the seam allowance, and you're going to do that before you put the lining on, but we're not. So we're going to stitch 1/4 inch along that seam, not a centimetre. Okay, so it's slightly different on these zipper edges. Okay, so I've stitched along that seam. Then I'm going to flip it over so that the fabrics are wrong sides together. And if you want to, you can clip that in place, like so. And then we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from that edge. Now, when I'm doing my top stitching, I like to use a 4 stitch length or sometimes a 4.5. It gives it a slightly more professional finish. It also is less perforation, and it doesn't coincide too much with the stitches that you've done underneath. So it's a little bit less perforation in that. Also, for my structured seams, if I'm using faux leather or cork or vinyl, if you want to call it vinyl, I use a number 3 stitch length. If I am using quilting cotton, then I do a 2.5. If I'm doing a mixture of quilting cotton and faux leather, cork or vinyl, I always go with the higher stitch length. Okay, then we're going to make our zipper flap. So to do that, we've got pattern piece 20. We're going to fold it right sides together, and we're going to stitch, we're going to clip it first, and then we're going to stitch just along those 2 short edges. And we're going to stitch with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that is throughout this project unless I specify otherwise. Okay, so that's sewn, those 2 edges. I'm going to cut off those corners at an angle. And I'm just going to cut down the seam allowance to 1/2 centimetre. Then I'm going to turn that zipper flap the right way out. And you can use a pokey tool to help you to do that. Just going to pop a clip on each end just to help flatten that seam. Then what we can do is we can top stitch around that zipper flap, and we're going to do that with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge. And again, this is top stitching, so I'm on my machine, I'm going to do that as a 4 stitch length. Okay, coming back to the table, we are going to then attach it or place it in the middle of our piece that we sewed before. So I'm just going to find the middle of that, and I'm going to make a little mark. And I'm going to find the middle of my zipper as well. Make a little mark in there. And I'm going to place those 2 together. Now I'm going to use double-sided tape to do that to help me. Always when working with the zips, I like to use double-sided tape. Just keeps it really nice and stable in the right place and stops the zipper kind of doing anything weird with the tension between the 2 fabrics. So I've lined those up, and you want to have your zipper flap, if there is a right side and a wrong side, you want to have the top side up, facing up. Okay, so we've got all the right sides facing up at this point. Then you're going to want to baste that in place, and you're doing that within the seam allowance, so about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Next, you're going to want to get pattern piece 19, which is the middle panel top, and you want to make sure that you've got the top facing up and the bottom is aligned with this edge. You will see that one is a bit smaller, so you want to make sure that you've got the longer length facing that zipper. Then you're going to want to place it right sides down, and again we're going to use our double-sided tape to do that. And you want to centre that. If your zipper is a little bit wider, you want to make sure that that piece is centred. And we're going to baste that on within the seam allowance about 1/8 of an inch, again from the edge. Okay, now that's stitched, we're going to flip it over and we're going to find our lining, and we're going to make that reach up so that you've got the raw edges of the lining matching the raw edges there. And then we're going to place some more double-sided. You don't have to use double-sided, I just find it a lot easier. And always use double-sided quilter's tape, not regular double-sided. Okay, then we're going to stitch that with 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. And then when we've sewn that, we're going to flip the front piece up and we're going to stitch with 1/8 inch seam allowance top stitch along that edge to hold it all back nicely. Okay, so we're nearly there. The final thing to do for this part is to just baste. We're going to baste the lining to that top panel. So I want to make sure that's all nice and centered. Might be easier to do it from the back for this bit. I'm going to just clip that to the front piece, pattern piece 1. And then I'm going to baste within the seam allowance about 1/2 centimetre along each edge. It's a good idea when you're doing this to just pull your zipper into the middle just to be sure it's not caught when you're stitching. Now that that's done, this is the point where you're going to want to add in your handmade tag if you are wanting to. And we're going to add that so that it's centered and it's 3 centimeters down from the top. I like to then just kind of use the prongs to place it. So I push the prongs into the outer fabric just so that there's a mark. It's ever so subtle, but it's there. And then very carefully, I'm going to poke a hole with my scissors. And then we're going to want to get a little piece of Decoville just to make it extra strong. And we're going to place that on the back. Got this little offcut here. I'm just going to round the corners. You can fuse it to the back as well if you want to, but you don't have to. Then you put the keeper on the back. And I like to push my prongs to the outside. Like so. You can also put a little bit of gaffer tape on the back there as well if you want to, if you're worried about it coming through at any point. You want to make sure if you are using gaffer tape that you keep it well out of the seams as well, because obviously you don't want your needle going through that gaffer tape. Okay, for this next bit, we're going to need the piece that we've just stitched. We're going to need pattern piece 2, and we're going to need our 2 pieces of cording that we prepped earlier. So we're going to want to place our cording so that it's facing our pattern piece 1. And we're just going to clip that in place. Then you're going to want to get one of your pattern piece 2. Now, it's really important when we're looking at this that we do it so that the curve is going in the correct direction. So I'm just going to move things around so it's a bit easier to see. Your pattern piece 2 is shaped and there is a bend, a slight bend to it. So you're going to want to make sure that the bend is following that curve of that piece, okay? So make sure you've got that right. You do not want to be doing it like that so that it's going away from the curve. Okay, so what we can do is we can baste our cording in place all the way along that edge. That's going to help us a little bit. You don't have to baste it. You can just go ahead and sew that seam, but it's probably a good idea to make our lives a little bit easier. While you're at it, you may as well do the other side as well. And the raw edges of the cording, in case I didn't say, the raw edges of that are going to match the pattern piece 1 that we have just done. So I'm going to baste that in place using a zipper foot within the seam allowance. So I'm just going to go just shy of the stitches that we did before. Okay, so I've basted on those 2 pieces of piping. You can see they're a bit longer. I'm not going to worry about that. We can sort that out in a little bit. Then we're going to grab our front strip outer, which is pattern piece 2. And we're going to grab the 2 of those. Now, you're going to see that they are slightly shaped. They are slightly curved. And can you see they go with that curve of the edges of the piece that we've just sewn? You want to make sure that you're not stitching it with the curve going against it. Okay, that's really important. It needs to go with, not against. So that is wrong, that one is right. Then we're going to place it right sides together along one edge, and I'm going to clip it all the way along. Once I've clipped it, I'm then going to stitch with a centimetre seam allowance as close as I can to that piping. I'm going to use a zipper foot to do that. Okay, so all our piping is now attached. We're going to jump ahead a little bit to step 32, and we are going to top stitch along each of these strips. This makes it a little bit easier when we're at this stage. So we're just going to push, make sure our seam allowance is going to want to go this way anyway, but we're going to make sure that our seam allowance is going towards these side pieces, and we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from that edge on the strip side, just to keep the seam allowance and everything really nice and keep it laying nice and flat. Okay, so those side pieces are now top stitched. We're going to put that to one side and come back to that later. And we're going to move along to our side straps. Okay, so moving along, we're going to work on our side straps, which is pattern piece 10. We're going to do one at a time, and we're going to just mark 1 inch in the middle all the way along. Then using our double-sided tape, we're just going to pop that down the middle. And we're going to push each side, or fold each side in to meet that line so that it sticks onto the double-sided tape, and we're going to clip it in place. Then we're going to top stitch each side 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the edge. Okay, now that's stitched, we're also going to repeat that for the other strap, and we're going to put both of them to one side. Then we're going to work on our pattern piece 3s and our pattern piece 4. So you want to grab 2 of your 3s and 1 of your 4. And the 2 that you take from your pattern piece 3 need to be mirror versions. You want to make sure that you've got all your notches marked on as per the pattern. And then we are going to take the 2 pattern piece 3s and we're going to put them right side together. And we're going to stitch along this shorter of the 2 edges. Now it's important to note that this is a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance along this edge. All the other seams are 1 centimeter in this pattern. You'll see why when we come to the next step. So we're going to stitch that with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. While you're at the machine, you're also going to want to stitch the very short seam, the bottom edge if you like. And we're going to sew that with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I've sewn those 2 seams. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take our pattern piece 4, which is the kind of oval, and we're going to match it up with these notch marks that we have on these other pieces. Now, before we actually go ahead and clip it, we're also going to snip into the seam allowance. So I'm going to make little snips all the way around. This is going to really help to get those seams to match, those edges to match. You want to make sure that you're keeping to about 0.5 centimeter so that you don't cut too far into the piece. And then we're going to clip really well all the way around. And when we're clipping, we are matching up those notch marks. The reason why there are 2 or double notch marks in place is so that you make sure you attach the bottom to the bottom and the top to the top. Now it may feel that the oval doesn't want to fit in when you do this. Just take it slow. Start by matching up all of those notch marks and then easing it all in to meet. If you have done your seam allowance accurately, this should fit almost perfectly. It is going to be a little bit of a push and a pull, but you will get there. You want to make sure that you don't have any puckers or folds when you're doing this. I like to use lots and lots of clips, and then when I stitch it on the machine, I'm going to use a zipper foot and I'm going to go nice and slow and make sure that that is easing out. When it comes to these seams, we want to make sure that we're pressing open the seam allowance and clipping that so that when we stitch it, we are sewing the seam allowance open. Okay, so now that's really well clipped. I'm going to stitch that on the machine with a zipper foot. I'm going to stitch it from the kind of tall side, the pattern piece 3 side. That's going to make it a bit easier. And I'm going to push and pull the fabric so that there are no puckers as I sew along. That's really important. We don't want to get any puckers or folds. Okay, now that's sewn, we've got a couple of options for the next bit, depending on the look that you want to have on your bag. So you can either push the seam allowance so that it goes into the oval, or you can push the seam allowance so it goes to the outside. Now, it's going to be easier, it's going to want to sit nicer going to the outside. But if you top stitch it on the outside circle, you're going to make the corner look like it's recessed. If we push it to the inside, it's going to make the corner pop out more. So depending on what you'd like to do, depends on which action you're going to take. In the instructions, it tells you to push it onto the inside. So that's what we're going to do. But if you find it easier or you want to have a different look, you can, of course, like I say, push the seam allowance to the outside. So to push it to the inside, because we've got all this excess fabric, we're going to want to make lots and lots of small triangular cuts to that inner circle, that corner piece, and that's going to help it lie flatter when we stitch it. I'm also cutting out the triangles on the outer edge as well, the outer seam allowance, so that that also fits into that smaller circle. Now I've made all those snips, I'm going to push that to the inside, and then I'm going to sew on the machine with the top stitching on that inside circle, and I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from that seam edge. And as I'm stitching, I'm going to make sure that all of my seam allowance is pushed into the middle and that I'm catching it all nice and flat. Okay, so now that that's sewn, we're going to put that to one side. I'm going to grab one of our straps and one of our D-rings, pop the D-ring on, and then we're going to fold it over by 4 centimeters. So it's 4 centimeters from that top fold to the bottom edge. Then we're going to pop a clip to hold that in place, and then we're going to stitch on the machine as close as we can to that D-ring to keep it nice and secure. Then what we're going to do is we're going to lay that on top. Now it's really important that you make sure that the top edge of your fold that's on your D-ring is 3 centimeters down from this top edge. You'll see what I mean when we get to that bit. So we're going to clip it in the middle, so the middle of the strap is right over that side seam, okay, because we want to hide that completely. And then we're going to place it along so that it follows, covering up that side seam. Then we're going to take it over to our machine and we're going to top stitch following those stitches that we made on the strap, and we're going to be about 1 millimeter or 1/16 of an inch from that first stitch line on the inside. Now as we're sewing, we can use double-sided tape if you want to, because we're going to want to keep this seam allowance open, pressed open. So you can use double-sided tape to keep that open, nice and open, or you can just manipulate it as you go with your hands. You can also use double-sided tape to keep that in place if you want to as well. When you come to the top where the D-ring is, when you're sewing on the strap, you want to make sure that you pivot about 1 inch from the fold on the D-ring, and then you can go round and back down along the strap again. Okay, so that's all stitched. Then you want to do exactly the same with the other side as well. Okay, so you've got your 2 sides with your 2 bottom corners. Then we're going to pop a rivet in the top, just under the D-ring, in that space. You're going to have a space there where it's not attached, so we're going to pop a D-ring in on each side. Now it's worth noting as well, when you do this D-ring, you're going to want to make sure that the hole is just slightly to one side. You don't want to cut the stitches on this side seam. I'm also going to pop a little bit of Decaville light or stiff interfacing on the back, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. Next we're going to grab our main panel that we stitched earlier, and we're going to want to attach these 2 side pieces to it. So we're going to put it right sides together, and we're going to fold the main panel around those corners. We're going to clip them in place, and then we're going to sew with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way along. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch up those 2 seams. Okay, so now the main bit of the bag is all attached together. Then we want to just continue on the top stitching that we have on the one side of the strip on the other side. So we're going to push the seam allowance to that side, and then we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to top stitch on the side of the strip about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. pulling back the seam allowance as we go and catching it in place. Okay, so now that that's all stitched up and I've done my top stitching, I've just chopped off the tops of the piping and we're going to put that to one side. And we're going to grab our pattern piece 11, which is our handle. I'm going to grab also the piece of cording, which is going to go inside too. Then we're going to mark in the middle, straight down the middle, which is 1.25 inches. Can use any pen, doesn't have to be a friction pen when you do this because you're never going to see it. This piece has of course been interfaced with woven interfacing. Because it is the handle, we don't want it to stretch, which non-woven interfacing can do if you're using it for something like this, which needs to have structure and strength. Okay, then we're going to place double-sided tape down the middle. And we're going to fold each long edge into that line. And we're going to clip it in place. Then we're going to turn it over and we're going to get our template for the end of the handles. Now, as you will have seen in the instructions, you want to make sure that you don't cut this out of fabric. This is just for this step. I'm going to move my clips up a little bit. And then we're going to place that on top, and then using a friction pen, or you can use a gel pen if it's faux leather or vinyl, you want to make sure that it can be removed. We're going to lay that on top. We're matching up the point of the template with the end of the handle, and we're just going to draw that line on like so, and we're going to do the same at the other end. You want to make sure that when you take your clips off that it is staying in the same place. The double-sided tape will help with that. And then we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to sew on each end, but we're going to start 6 centimeters from that end point, the end of the handle. I'm just going to make a little mark there with my pen again so that I know where that is. So we're going to start here, we're going to go along, we're top stitching, so we're going about 1/8 of an inch or a few mils from the edge. We're going to follow that curve or the point around, back up, and we're going to stop here. Now when you go along this line, we're going again 1/8 of an inch, we're treating this line as the cut edge. And also we are going to, when we stop and start, we're going to leave a long tail and tie that after so it looks like a continuous stitch when we come to do the other part of the handle. Now that I've stitched those two ends, I'm going to pull the threads through and tie them off underneath. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to cut along that line that we drew from our template. So being very careful that we don't go on our stitches, follow that line to create that point of the handle. Okay, do the same on the other end. Now at this point, if you want to, you can coat the edges, you can edge coat it. I'm not going to on this one. You can also just paint it with a Sharpie or acrylic if you want to. We're also going to wipe away those marks that we made with our gel pen. Next, we're going to turn it so that the handle is right side down. And we're going to grab some more double-sided tape. Now, preferably if you have wider tape, it is a bit better, a bit easier. But you could just use 2 strips of your thinner one if you have a thinner one only. And we're going to place that in the middle on the back, straight down that seam where the edges butt up against each other. Removing our clips as we go. And you'll notice that I've done it about 1 inch from the edge of my stitching, and you're going to want to do that on the other end as well. Like so. Get rid of all those clips now, that should stay nicely in place. Then we're going to get our cord, which we've pre-cut, and we're going to stick that on top, and we're going to make sure it's centered. And this cord is 38 centimeters or 15 inches. Now it's worth noting at this point as well, if you wanted to make longer handles, then you certainly can do. This is a kind of mid-length handle. You can just about fit it on your shoulder, but it's also great for just carrying in your hands too. Just going to cut off that bit of fluff. Okay, so that's nicely held there in the middle where the edges butt up. Then we're going to fold it again and we're going to clip all the way along. Then we're going to top stitch along there and we're going to start and stop where our stitches begin and end. Okay, so we're not going over those stitches that we just made. And we're stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and again I'm doing it in my top stitch, which for me is about a 4 length. Again, I'm going to pull my threads through and tie them off. This time I'm going to tie them on the inside, then I'm using my needle to thread it back down the main part of the handle to get the threads really nice and out of the way. Once you've done that on one handle, you want to repeat that for the second handle so that you have 2. Then we're going to grab the main part of the bag that we made earlier, and we want to make a mark that is 7 centimeters or 2 3/4 inches from that top edge, and that should land right in the middle of that zipper flap there. Okay, and we're going to use our friction pen or our gel pen that removes. Do the same on the other side. And you want to make sure that that is exactly the same on each side so that it's even. Then we are going to place one of our handles. Now your handle should fit almost exactly between those stitch lines. And the point of your handle is going to land at that mark that you have just made. And we're going to place a little bit of double-sided there to keep it in place. I recommend you put this onto the handle rather than onto the main bit of the bag. And you don't want to put too much on, so that we can make sure it is hidden with our stitches and our rivets. I'm going to pop the other end onto the other side. Again, check that it is in the right place. Then we're going to make our rivet marks. So we're going to want to mark 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom. And then we're also going to want to mark 2.5 or 1 inches up from the bottom and centered as well. And we're going to do that on both sides. Then we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to stitch around that bottom edge, and we're going to start and stop either side of that top 1 inch mark. We're going to do that on both ends of the handle to secure it. Now, it's worth noting that you don't have to do the stitching part of this, but it does keep it a little more secure and it stops the bottom edge from flapping up even with the rivets there. Just going to pull those threads through and tie them in a knot to secure. Then I'm going to go ahead and pop my rivets in at the marks that we made before. Like before, I'm using some Decaville Light at the back just to help really secure them and keep them strong. Okay, once you've done the one side, you're going to want to go ahead and repeat it for the other handle and the other side. So now my two handles are attached, I've put the rivets on and I've taken away those marks as well. So that is the outside of our bag. We're going to put that to one side and we're going to work on our lining. So to start with the lining, you're going to want to grab your pattern piece 12, which is the inside divider pockets. And we're going to want to place that right sides together, and we want to make sure it is along the height. Okay, so it is a rectangle. It shows you on the pattern piece where the top is. So you want to make sure that you are folding it the correct way. And we're going to place it right sides together. And we're going to sew along that opening to close it with 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that's stitched, we're going to turn it the right way out. And we're going to press it so that the seam that you've just sewn is on the bottom. And then we're going to top stitch along the top edge. So you've got the seam along the bottom edge. We're going to top stitch along the top edge about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so next we're going to grab our pattern piece 8, which is our middle divider. We're going to open it up and we're going to place it on the table so that the curve of the piece is on the right. Then we're going to grab the piece that we have just stitched, pattern piece 12, and we're going to place it so that the edges, the raw edges, line up on this left side. And we want to make it so that the bottom is 3.5 centimetres or 1 3/8 up from that bottom edge. And we're going to baste within the seam allowance, so about 0.5 centimetre along that edge to keep it secure. Then we're going to mark 4 centimetres along from that left edge, and we're going to make a mark. Okay, then we're going to fold it back on that mark and press it. Then we're going to mark 1.5 centimetres, which is 9/16, from that fold back towards the left. And we're going to fold it back towards the right edge and press. This is a little bit like when you make card slots. And this is going to give us some pockets which are kind of concertinaed and give us a nice depth so we can put wider things inside. Once you've done that, we're going to open up the fold and we're going to mark 9 centimetres along to the left. And that is 3 9/16 of an inch. And we're going to fold on that mark to the right and press. Now when you're folding it, you want to make sure that all of these top edges and the bottom edges are nicely aligned and they're not kind of off at an angle. That's going to make our pockets nice and straight. So we've still got that fold that we did before. Then we're going to make a mark 1.5 centimetres or 9/16 from that fold to the right. And fold it back and press. Then if we fold it back, making sure we go with that fold, can you see what's happening? We've made a nice little concertina pocket there. Going back to where we just were with that fold, we also want to make a 4.5 centimetre mark as well, which is 1 3/4 inch. And a 6 centimetre, which is 2 3/8 of an inch. So we're doing 4.5 and 6. So we've still got our 1.5 mark there, 4.5 and 6. Then we can open it up so that we've got our first pocket. And then what we can do is we can use the fold to kind of match up so that we're bending on this mark here to the left and press. And then we're bending on the next mark to the right and press. So I'll show you that again. We started off on the left edge by basting it to our pattern piece 8. Then we made a mark which is 4 centimeters along, and we folded our piece to the left. Then we made a mark which is 1.5 centimeters long, and we folded it back to the right and we pressed. We opened it up again and we made a mark that is 9 centimeters long, and we folded it and pressed. Then we made a mark which is 1.5 centimeters, 4.5 centimeters and 6 centimeters, and we folded it to the left on the 1.5 centimeter mark. Then we folded it so that they meted in the middle along the next 2 marks. So we've ended up like this. Now you should end up with this top corner matching or nearly matching this edge of pattern piece 8. Okay, so you want to clip or pin that in place. Then we're going to carefully open up our folds, trying to keep it in place. So I recommend that you pin it just to keep it nice and secure while you do this next bit. And we're going to carefully open up and we're going to top stitch along these 2 edges here and along this edge. That's going to help keep those pockets really nice and crisp. Okay, so we had a few issues with the recording here, but you want to open up the 2 bits that you have just stitched the edges of and stitch down the middle to complete those 2 pockets. Then we're going to top stitch right the way along the bottom of that pocket to finish the pocket. And then finally along that right raw edge, we're going to baste within the seam allowance 0.5 centimeter to close. To place the other pattern piece 8 on top, right sides together, and we're going to stitch along the long straight edge. This is going to help make our other divider pocket in the middle. Okay, so you're going to stitch all the way along that straight edge, and you're sandwiching the concertina pockets that you've just stitched inside. Then you're going to open it up, and you want to open it up so it's wrong sides together, and then we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge, hopefully with the different coloured linings that I have chosen here for the 2 different pattern piece 8s. You can see and figure out what is going on with this close-up. So sorry about the technical glitch. Moving along, we are going to now work on the cup holder, which is pattern piece 9. I have just taken pattern piece 9 and placed it right sides together. You want to make sure that this is along the longest part of the pattern piece, and then we stitched along the bottom edge just like normal, 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch, and then I turned it the right way out. Then I have top stitched it along each long edge 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I am placing that sewn seam along the bottom, and then I'm going to grab the middle or center divider with our pockets that we sewed earlier, and I'm going to place that with the pocket side right side down. And I'm lining up that left raw edge and that top edge as well. Pop a couple of clips in place to keep that nice and secure. And then we are going to simply sew within the ditch, within that where that seam line is, straight the way down, finishing at the bottom of the cup holder. Okay, so you may find it easier to go from the other side. You can judge it yourself. At least if you go from this side, you can see where you're sewing. So I am going to just pop a little pin in there so that I know that that is the bottom edge. And I'm going to stitch using a shorter stitch length of 2.5 rather than a top stitch, because we want to make sure this is really nice and secure. Okay, so now that that's stitched, we can fold the central divider onto itself so that those curves are aligned. Push that one out of the way. So that is going to be our cup holder or bottle holder, and then this is going to be our central pocket. And then we can clip this in place, and we're going to baste within the seam allowance along that curve. Then we can put that to one side and we can move on to doing the inside zipper pocket. So for that, we're going to need pattern piece 16, which is our actual pocket pieces. And then we're going to need pattern piece 14, which is the bottom of lining middle panel, and pattern piece 15, which is the top. Also going to need our zipper, of course, as well. So I'm going to grab some double-sided tape and I'm going to place the zipper along the top. Now the top is the slightly smaller size, the bottom is slightly wider. And I'm going to place my zipper face down. Now I have basted the ends of my zipper already, and there will be a little bit of an overhang. That's fine, it's just to give a little bit more seam allowance on your zipper, which makes it a bit easier. Okay, then we're going to baste within the seam allowance along that edge. Okay, so I've basted that in place. Then we're going to take one of our inside pockets, and as you can see, it does follow the shape of that piece as well. So you want to make sure that the shorter length is along the top. We're going to place some double-sided on top, and we're going to place that pattern piece 16, right sides down. And then we're going to stitch that seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. Now that's sewn, we're going to open that up, place the two pieces wrong sides together, and we're going to top stitch 1/8 inch from that edge. Okay, so that is now top stitched. Then we're going to do exactly the same with the top part of the zipper. And we're going to be using pattern piece 15. You want to make sure that the longer side of pattern piece 15 is matching the zipper edge. Turn it over, and then we're going to place our pattern piece 16 right sides down. Now you'll notice I am not basting. You don't have to baste. It does make it a little bit easier, but because we've got the double-sided tape, we don't have to. And again, this is the shorter length of pattern piece 16 going along the top. And we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've stitched along that top, and then I have folded that top piece back, and I have top stitched along that edge, making sure that the pocket is facing down the piece. Okay, and then what you will notice, let me just take those clips out. What you will notice is that the pocket pieces are not the same length. You'll have this top one which is longer. I've actually cut it already, but you'll see that this one will be longer than the bottom one. So what you want to do is just cut that off so that they are the same length. Don't worry, they will be a different length. And then we're going to go over to the machine, and we're going to sew along the bottom with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, then we're going to put the top of the pocket down. Going to snip that off, and then we're going to baste within the seam allowance from the just above the zipper. So we're going to catch the zipper going all the way down to make the zipper pockets nice and secure to this piece so that it's all together. Okay, then we're going to get pattern piece 18, and we just want one of these. And we're going to place that right sides together along that right edge. And then we're going to sew that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to open it up and we're going to top stitch 2 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Also, when you're top stitching that, you want to make sure that the seams are going towards that strip. Then we're going to place on the pocket section that we stitched before, and we're lining up that bottom edge, the bottom raw edges, and we're lining up this left edge of the shorter bit of the cup holder. Okay, so we're lining those up. And pop some clips in. The bottom edge of the cup holder will be 7.5 centimeters up from the bottom, which is 2 15/16. Then we're going to baste within the seam allowance along this left edge. Then we're going to grab another one of those strips and we're going to lay that right sides together on top of that side that we've just stitched. And we're going to sew with 1 centimetre, 3/8 of a seam allowance, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to open it up and top stitch it with the seam allowance going towards the strip, just like we did on the other side. Only this time we are sandwiching that part of the cup holder between it. So next we're going to grab pattern piece 17 and the last 2 strips, and we're going to place them right sides together along those long edges. And we're going to do just the same as we did before. We're going to stitch along both seams with 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to open them up, push the seam allowance towards the strips, and then we're going to top stitch with a 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the edge. Okay, now that's stitched, we're going to put that to one side and we're going to sew up the 4 sides of the bag. So you're going to want pattern piece 13, which are these funny shapes, and we want pattern piece 23. And we're going to take one of each. I need to take the corresponding one, the corresponding pattern piece 23, because the notches are going to match up. And then we're going to snip into the edge, going all the way around within the seam allowance around that curve. So it's very similar to what we did before on the outside of the bag, but this time of course it's for our lining. And this time the oval is not a complete kind of shape. It's a semicircle. So we are going to match up our notch marks, and we're going to put lots and lots of pins in this because we can, because it's not the outer faux leather or vinyl cork. We can put lots of pins in, and that is really going to help us. Also, what's going to help us is using a zipper foot, and we're going to stitch from the pattern piece 13 side. That's going to help us to get that all nicely stitched without any lumps and bumps and tucks. So I'm going to take that over to the machine and I'm going to stitch around that curve. Okay, so now that's sewn, you can either press it so that the seam lays nice and flat, or you can also top stitch it as well if you would like to. I am just going to press mine, but I'm going to do it all at the end because we need to repeat that with the other 3. Okay, so I've sewn those 4 sides up, the 4 corners. Then we're going to grab the pieces that we stitched earlier. We're going to grab the one with the pockets on it, and we are going to stitch them together. So you want to make sure that the corner pieces, those oval pieces, are on the outside. Okay, so we're not sewing these to this strip. We're doing the opposite. So I'm going to grab a pair, right sides together, and I'm going to sew along those two long seams, again with our usual 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now those are sewn on. We're then going to baste in our pockets because they're still floating around a little bit. So we're going to line up the raw edges on the right. Make sure that that is following a nice straight line. Clip it in place, following that curve. And then we're going to do the same with the other side of the cup holder. Make sure that that is in a nice straight line. We're lining up that top left corner. Now, because this piece is not curved, you will find there is a bit of excess at the bottom. As you can see there, I'm just going to cut that off. It's only about 1 centimetre, and then I'm going to clip that, and I'm going to baste within the seam allowance along those two edges. So now that's basted in place, you can get a sense of the pockets and the inside really coming together now. I'm going to pop that to one side, and we're going to work on the opposite side, and we're going to take our other two sides with the corner pieces. And you want to make sure that the smaller side is at the top. And again, we're making sure that the corners are on the outside, and we're going to place them right side together, and we're going to sew along those two seams. However, on the left, we're going to leave a turning hole of around 6 or 7 inches. So we're going to sew up the top, sew up the bottom, and leave a big gap. Okay, so I've sewed up those two seams. Then I'm going to press them so that the seam allowance is going towards the side of the bag. You could also top stitch if you want to, but it kind of gets a bit tricky with the turning hole, so I'm not going to. But I am going to still press that open so that it has a nice crease for when we come to sew up our hand sewing up our turning hole at the end. So I'm going to do that on both of the two lining pieces. I'm going to press them with the seam allowance, and then I'm going to put them to one side. Next, we're going to work on the zipper tab. Now, if you've got a metal zipper tab, then you're going to not want to cut out this pattern piece, and you're just going to want to attach that to your end. We are going to make a fabric zipper tab, so I have cut out of the outer fabric pattern piece 5, and I'm going to place it right sides together, and then I'm going to sew along the two shorter edges, and I'm going to sew with our usual 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to cut that seam allowance down by half, and I'm going to cut a little triangle off of the ends by the fold. I'm going to turn it the right way out. Let's get rid of those threads as well. This can be a little bit fiddly, just go slowly, it will happen, just takes a little bit of a push and a pull. Then you want to turn that raw edge under by about 1/2 centimetre. Once that's folded over, I'm just going to put a little clip on to keep that nice and flat. So also going to help with the fold. Next, we're going to take our zipper, and I'm going to make sure that that is really straight. At the minute, mine is not very straight. And then we're going to fold the two corners under, like so. And we're going to push that inside our zipper tab. trying to keep the folds nice and neat. And we're trying to push the zipper all the way in. Then we're going to take that over to the machine and we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge to secure it to the zipper. Okay, so I've got my zipper tab on the closed end of my zipper, and as you can see I've got the open end and the zipper pull at the other end. Now by habit I have basted my zipper closed, so I'm just going to snip that stitch and open it. I'm going to feed the teeth back in and make sure that the end of my zipper is really nice and straight. And I'm going to seal the end of my zipper again. Then I'm going to take pattern piece 6, which is the zipper plaquet, and I'm going to take one of these. I'm going to open up my zipper. I'm going to place it right sides down so that the end is level with that left edge. Then I'm going to get my trusty double-sided tape. I'm going to place that along that edge. I'm going to place the zipper right side down, so they're right sides together, like so. Then I'm going to peel up the end so that it is 1 centimetre from the edge and turn it at a right angle. Pop a clip in. Just going to get my tape measure and check that that is 1 centimetre from the edge. Yep, so the teeth are 1 centimetre from the edge. Then I'm going to baste within the seam allowance about 1/2 centimetre all the way along. But I want to make sure that I stop 1 centimetre from this right edge. Okay, then we are going to make sure the other side of the zipper is well out of the way. Your pull is right down at the bottom by your zipper tab. And then we're going to place another one of pattern piece 6, the zipper plaquet, on top, right sides together. And we're going to stitch along that left hand side at 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to go all the way along the top, but we're going to change to 1/4 of an inch along that top edge, and then we're going to stop 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from the end. Okay, so now that's sewn, I'm going to chop off that corner, being careful not to cut the zipper tape. I'm going to chop that off at an angle, and I'm going to cut down one side of the seam allowance, like so. So I've cut that in half. That's going to help for when we turn it. And I'm going to also cut off 1/2 of this seam allowance going along the top as well. This is going to help reduce the bulk. Then I'm going to turn it so that it's the right way out. Like so, and I'm going to pop some clips along the raw edge here. And then when it comes to this end here, we're going to turn it under by that seam allowance. So you may need to fold it a little bit to get that nice crisp corner. And fold it along the top, And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to fold it along the bottom. I want to match that up together. Pop a couple of clips in as well. And then we're going to top stitch all the way around about 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the edge. So then it will look like this, and then we're going to repeat that on the other side. And when you're working on the other side, you want to make sure that the zipper is not twisted and that you're following the same sides when you add on the different zipper plackets, and you want to make sure that you're mirroring that first side. Okay, so your zipper will then look like this. Then we're going to grab our inside facing, which is pattern piece 7. Now you want to note that these are slightly shaped, these pieces. One side is shorter than the other of the two long sides, so you want to make sure that we are going with the longer side for these next bits. It's only slightly different, but it is there. You want to make a mark in the middle of each piece on the zipper placket. Then making sure again that we've got the longer length placed against this raw edge. I'm going to line up the mark we just made with the middle of the facing. Pop a couple of clips in there. And at the same time, I'm going to do the other side. And I'm going to baste along that edge 1/2 centimetre within the, so it's within the seam allowance. Okay, next we're going to attach our lining pieces to these facings, and we're sandwiching in the zipper placket. So we want to grab our linings that we have sewn earlier. This is the front of the bag, and I want my zipper to close on the right hand side so that I can open it easily, because I like to wear my bag on the right. So that will be your preference. So I'm going to lay the lining face up, and I'm going to put the zipper facing on top with the zipper placket sandwiched in the middle. I'm lining up the top, this is the top of my lining, and the bottom edge of my facing. I'm going to clip that in place, and then I'm going to stitch that to it with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Repeat that on the other side of the facing. So again, laying the facing, so again laying the lining right side up and the facing right side down, sandwiching in the zipper placket, and we're going to stitch along that seam. After you've stitched this seam, you can optionally then top stitch, and you're going to want to push the seam allowance towards the top of the bag, towards the facing, and then top stitch 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the edge. Okay, so now our facing and our zipper placket is all attached. I'm just going to open up that zipper. It's going to make the next bit a little bit easier. Make sure everything is tucked in, and we're going to line up those two lining pieces, and we are going to sew all the way around the bottom and the sides. And again, we're using our 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And as we go round, we want to just line up all of the seams in the lining, just to make it really nice and neat. Now you may find some of these seams are a little bit thick because we've got quite a few layers in there in places, so you may want to move up to a number 110 jeans needle or just a thicker needle to get through some. Now is the time to sew the two bags together. So with our lining wrong side out and our outer bag right side out, we're going to place the outer bag inside our lining. You want to make sure, of course, that you've got the pocket on the right side, because you don't want to kind of try and shove the outer bag inside that divider pocket. Also want to make sure you're lining up the bag in the right way, the right side. I almost did that the wrong way because I want my zipper pocket to be on the back side. You're going to want to put the handles inside the bag as well so that it's all lined up. Then we're going to go around and we're going to clip the two pieces together, the top facing with the outer bag, and you're going to want to try and line up where you can the seam lines. Push that D-ring well out of the way, and I'm opening up the side seams so that we sew them flat and matching up that seam line as well. So when that's all clipped together, we're going to sew that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that's sewn, we're going to berth the bag through the opening in the lining. You want to turn the bag the whole way out. Then we're going to go around and clip the lining inside the bag just to hold that edge nice and crisp. And then we're going to do a final top stitch around the edge, 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters from the edge. And that's going to give our bag a really nice professional finish. Now the final thing to do is just to close our turning hole. So you just want to reach inside the bag, pull the lining out, and then we're going to hand stitch that hole closed. You can machine stitch it, but honestly it looks a bit better hand sewn on this one because you can see it because it's in the side of the bag. And there we have our finished bag. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've loved this tutorial. Do check out the video that's coming up on the screen right now because I really think you're going to love the next one, and I'll see you on the next video.